Greetings. Welcome to another edition of the Red Pill Diaries. I'm your host, Rashid. We have our co-host in the booth, and we have a very special guest for you. But before we bring him on, I have to say this. The reason that we're trying to broadcast on this backup channel is because we did a live show with co-founder or founder of Scholars for 911 Truth, Jim Fetzer, last week. And right on cue, just as he said, for having him on the show, not only did YouTube erase a lot of our subscribers, but they also suspended us and gave us 2 strikes and told us that even on our appeal, they rejected it. They did the same thing when we had Scott Bennett on there the first time. They did the same thing when we had a few other guests. Every time we get a guest on, they suspend us. They come up with some kind of rationale to suspend us, but we have a backup channel here, and we know that a lot of people don't know about it, so this will air on the other platforms later. And whoever catches it while it's airing now, we thank you for joining us. But now, without further ado, let me bring in our special guest. How's it going, Scott?
Good thing. I'll be on my best behavior so that we don't get you kicked off of YouTube.
How's it going with you?
I'm doing well, thanks. And thanks again for your patience and understanding. I know I missed a movement last time. I had an appointment and I wasn't there. I apologize for that, but here I am.
So. Yes. Before we go any further, could you tell the people about a little bit about yourself and your qualifications and what you've done that gives you the qualification to speak on global events, especially the Ukraine, U.S., Russia situation, the Iranian American situation, the Chinese Russian situation?
Well, I mean, the real answer is nothing. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. I'm entitled to an opinion, and I have some very strong opinions. I have had I think I would say a blessed life. Lots of opportunities that I stumbled into. I'm not really an expert on much. I played football and drank beer in college, but I also studied Russian history and took the Russian language. And from there, I went in the Marine Corps, got my commission, became an intelligence officer, and I spent a couple of years in 29 Palms, California, practicing and perfecting maneuver warfare, the art of closing with and destroying the Soviet enemy through firepower and maneuver. And I was solely, singularly focused on learning how to kill Russians better than they learned how to kill us. And then in 1987, December, Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev signed the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. And just to give everybody background on this, in the 1970s, the Soviets deployed a new missile called the SS-20. It had 3 nuclear warheads, and it was road mobile, very difficult to target. And overnight, they changed the balance of power in their favor. And it put NATO and Europe into an absolute panic. And in response to that, the United States deployed 2 systems of its own. One was called the Pershing II. The other one was called the Ground Launched Cruise Missile. And between these 3 systems, there were others involved, but mainly these 3 systems, Europe and indeed the world lived on the edge of a nuclear apocalypse. One mistake, 5 minutes later, the world ends. Very dangerous situation. And I actually grew up in Germany at the time. My dad was Air Force. And so when I can tell you that, you went to bed at night not knowing if you're going to wake up in the morning, yeah, it's true. It was absolutely true. When your dad disappeared into the nuclear bunker for days at a time without anybody knowing what's going on, when you live next door to a NATO nuclear weapons storage facility that would be hit first, you literally sometimes you read the headlines and went, wow, I may not be here in the morning. And so it was with mixed emotions when I was assigned in early 1988 to join this new organization called the On-Site Inspection Agency. It was created by the Department of Defense to implement the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty, which Ronald Reagan and Mikhail Gorbachev signed in December of 1987 to get rid of these missiles I was telling you about. Here I was, I wanted to kill these guys, but now I had to go over and work with them to get rid of these nuclear weapons. Turned out to be one of the best jobs I ever had. I spent 2.5 years with that organization, and for 2 years, from June 1988 until July 1990, I spent much of my time in outside of a Soviet missile factory, about 700 miles east of Moscow in the Ural Mountains, monitoring missile production to make sure the Soviets weren't producing anything they weren't allowed to produce. But I was also living in the heart of the Soviet Union, amongst the Russian people. And it was just an eye-opening experience to the people that you were singularly focused on killing, and understand that there's human beings just like you are. They have the same hopes, aspirations, dreams, desires. They laugh, they cry, they do everything. They're just like us. They just speak a different language. So I came away from that experience. I guess I could say confused, because having spent your whole adult life learning to kill somebody, finding out you actually like them, and then have the Cold War end. I mean, my dream job was to get appointed to what's called the military liaison mission. It was in Potsdam, Germany, East Germany, and it was a spying mission. You basically spied on the Soviet group of forces in East Germany. You ran around in hyped up off-road vehicles. You had cameras, and you ran around and took photos of things you weren't allowed to take photos of, and then you ran away before they could get you. That's what I wanted to do, but that job went away with the wall going down, etc. But I went back to the Marine Corps, and I did get a chance to put my skills to test. Iraq invaded Kuwait in August of 1990, and I ended up getting involved in the conflict first on a staff of a sort of a secret cell created by the Commandant of the Marine Corps to plan Marine amphibious options against Iraq. Then I was assigned to General Schwarzkopf's staff during the war, and because of my experience as a missile inspector in the Soviet Union, they thought that I was a missile expert. I wasn't, and I was given the job of hunting down Iraqi Scud missiles. So I worked very closely with U.S. Air Force, British Special Operations, American Special Operations to try and interdict Scud missiles before they could be launched. The war ended, and I had what they call a good war, which means I didn't get killed. It's always a plus, and I performed well. So I got really glowing fitness report. I got the awards and all that garbage. But when I went back to the Marine Corps, again, I was just like, why am I in the Marine Corps? Now, I served my country in war. No one could ever take that away from me. I did it, but I don't know if I want to do it again. I mean, I joined not to go kill Iraqis. I joined to kill Russians, and we're not in the Russian killing business anymore. So I thought maybe I should get out and get into the how do we cooperate with Russia business. So I got out of the Marine Corps, but before I could get in the how do we cooperate with Russia business, that old the Godfather line, Al Pacino. Every time I try to get out, they just reach out and grab me back in. And that's what happened here. I tried to get out, but I got a phone call from a colonel that I worked for in Russia, an American colonel. And he asked if I would come to the United Nations because they had a problem. Iraq was supposed to disarm of its weapons of mass destruction. Security Council of the United Nations passed a resolution in April of 91. By the summer of 91, it was apparent that the Iraqis were lying, cheating, not cooperating. And they needed to create an intelligence unit to help track down this missing material. And I had a good reputation as an intelligence officer, and I knew a lot about arms control. I actually helped write the book on on-site inspections, and I had my experience in the war. So they thought that would be useful for me to come in and help set up this United Nations intelligence unit to track down Iraqi weapons of mass destruction. One of the most interesting jobs I ever had, when I started that job, I just turned 30 years old. I don't know what people think of when they're 30. Most people think that they're gods and they walk on water. But now that I'm 61, looking back on it, I realize how young I was, how inexperienced I was. And I was put in this position where I suddenly had extraordinary amount of authority and responsibility, way above my pay grade. I was 30 years old doing things that, 50, 60-year-olds should be doing, people with maturity. I'm not saying that I was unqualified, but when you're doing this kind of stuff, you really do need some maturity to slow down. And when you're a 30-year-old Marine, there ain't no slow. And I charged into this thing. And one of the best jobs, like I said, my job was to gather intelligence. And I did this both on the ground in Iraq through a variety of means, but I also was the liaison with intelligence services around the world. And so I'd go off and meet with the heads of intelligence of the British intelligence, German intelligence, French intelligence, Israeli intelligence, Jordanian intelligence, and on and on and on. And it gathers intelligence. And then because I was a Marine and I had done inspections, I wouldn't hand this off to anybody. I'd create the inspection based upon the intelligence, and then I'd lead the inspection, go in and do it, gather more information, come back, and then the circle was complete. And I did this for 7 years. Like I said, best job I ever had. The job was 100% compliance on the part of Iraq. I can say that we achieved about 90, 95%. The stuff we couldn't account for, We just couldn't say. I mean, we bombed the heck out of that country, and so a lot of the stuff was destroyed and could never be reconstituted. The documents we needed to do verification had been destroyed, burned up in buildings. We traveled around the world and met with all the people that did business with the Iraqis. We gathered contacts. We were able to piece together what Iraq received, and then the Iraqis gave us a story about how it was accounted for. We would forensically investigate, and for the most part, we accounted for it. That which we couldn't, it's dust in the wind. You can't, it's gone. You're not going to get it. We could mitigate against not knowing what happened to some of this stuff by saying that we monitored the totality of Iraqi production capabilities. All the factories they could use to produce weapons, we monitored with cameras, on-site inspection, sensors, and we knew they weren't producing anything new. But the Security Council wouldn't accept the thing of, we think they're disarmed and they're not producing anything new. They said, are they 100% disarmed? And that was the United States saying that, because the American goal wasn't to disarm Iraq. It was to use inspections as a vehicle to continue sanctions that would weaken Saddam Hussein until we could remove him from power. So the last thing the United States government wanted me to do was succeed at my job. They wanted me to play the game, to pretend to inspect, but be more confrontational, create crises, so that the U.S. could justify the continuation of sanctions. That wasn't a game I was willing to play, not because I'm un-American. Look, I'm a big boy, and I play big boy rules. And but I went to the U.S. government early on in 1991, and I asked them straight up, "What do you want me to do? Is this an intelligence game? Wink, wink, nod, nod. Are we playing a secret thing here? Tell me so I can decide if I want to buy in." But I'm a man of my word. When I shake hands with somebody, it's because I'm guaranteeing an outcome. And the UN wants me to shake their hand and say that I'm here to implement Security Council Resolution 687 to the best of my ability. And they said, no, that's your job, to implement this to the best of your ability, 100%. I said, okay. And then for the next 7 years, I tried to do that all the while the U.S. was trying to play that wink, wink, nod, nod game. But I told them up front, I don't play that game. You had the chance to get me on that team. I could have been on team wink, wink, nod, nod. But you said, no, I'm on team handshake. So I'm on team handshake. I ride for the brand. And in the end, I just wouldn't play the game. So I resigned. I resigned in August of 1998. And I've been speaking out in criticism, where deserved, of American foreign policy since then. I speak out on arms control issues. I speak out on military issues. And I speak out on issues that impact American national security policy. So when I speak on a subject, I tend to do so when I feel comfortable offering my analysis. If somebody asks me a question about something I don't know anything about, I'll be the first one to say, that ain't me, babe. Go to the other guy, because I can't answer that one.
So before I bring my co-host in, I wanted to ask you, what lies at the root of this conflict in Ukraine, and how it's affecting the global economy and global politics?
Well, what lies at the root is a clash between the United States and NATO, who believed at the end of the Cold War, when the Soviet Union went away, that they should be the dominant force, not only in Europe, but in the world. And that Russia should never be allowed to stand back up in a manner that gave it the same kind of authority that the Soviet Union had. We know when Germany was going to reunite after the fall of the Berlin Wall in 1989, 1990, the Russians had 400,000 troops in Germany, East Germany. And the Russians said, we don't have a peace treaty since World War II. We don't have a peace treaty with the Germans. And the Russians always reminded people, they used to be called Nazis. Remember that? Back when they were Nazis, and we fought them to the death, and then we beat them and we occupied them because they were a defeated enemy. We don't have a peace treaty ending that status. And now you want to put them back together again. And we don't know what you're going to do with them. Are you going to make them part of NATO? Are they going to remilitarize? We lost 27 million people in a war against Nazi Germany, and we're a little uncomfortable about this. We need some assurances. And the United States and other nations talked with Gorbachev and the Soviets, and they said, we won't expand NATO one inch eastward. We promise. Our word of honor. Lips were moving, man. Never trust anybody. But the Russians, the Gorbachev, bought into it. And it wasn't just the U.S., it was the British, the French, the Germans. Everybody said, no, we have no intention to expand it. We had every intention. When James Baker came back, he was then the Secretary of State. when he came back from his discussion with Gorbachev, he went to the National Security Council. He said, "Yeah, I told him Wayne expanded NATO," and they went, "Shouldn't have said that, boss, because we are expanding NATO. It's our goal to expand NATO to absorb the Eastern European countries and to weaken Russia." And that's been our strategy from day one. We spent the 1990s basically exploiting Russia. We treated them like a defeated enemy. We stole them blind, robbed them blind. We created this class called oligarchs who basically took all of Russia's mineral wealth and transferred it to the United States, enriching themselves in the process, but making Russia an impoverished nation. We pretended to bring in democracy, but we didn't. In 2016, you hear everybody, "Oh, the Russians stole the election for Trump. The Russians stole the election for Trump." Well, we now know that was a lie. The Russians didn't steal the election for Trump. Everything they said was a full-faced lie. You know what isn't a lie? That the United States stole the election for Yeltsin in 1996.
Mhm.
Why do we know it's not a lie? Because we admitted it at the time. Time magazine ran a front-page cover. America steals the Russian democracy. We bragged about how we went in and bribed people and everything to keep our man in office. And that was the 1990s, horrible period of time. And then Putin comes in 1999, and he says, "I'm not playing that game. I'm playing the game called Russia gets to stand back up and be counted as a man among men, or a woman among women, a person among person." I'm not being sexist here. I don't want to get you kicked off of YouTube. But the thing is, Russia was saying, we are equal among nations. You can't hold us down. That's wrong. We're not trying to be a superpower. We're not trying to replace you. We just want to be Russia. And for the next, from say 2000 till 2022, what we had is a continual clash between the United States and NATO and Russia about Russia's future, where the United States and NATO wanted to keep Russia weak. And one of the cornerstones of their strategy was to go into Ukraine and strip Ukraine away and make it part of NATO, and therefore permanently weaken Russia. And Russia said, we're not going to let that happen. We want to work with you. We don't want to control Ukraine. We just want Ukraine to be neutral. We don't want it to be part of NATO. And that's not the game that was played. 2014, we orchestrated a coup in Ukraine. It's called the Maidan Revolution, but it was really where we empowered white supremacists, the neo-Nazis, Stepan Bandera, people whose, their hero, Stepan Bandera, fought with the Nazis in World War II, is responsible for the murders of tens of thousands of Jews, hundreds of thousands of Poles, hundreds of thousands of Russians. Why? Because they viewed Ukrainians as a super race, and they viewed everybody else as the inferior, so they murdered them, slaughtered them. These people took power. And then they started killing Russians. They stuffed 150 of them into a building in Odessa, set it on fire. 48 people burned to death or were shot or died jumping out of the burning building while they cheered and applauded. Then they tried to do the same thing in the Donbass, in Donetsk and Lugansk. The Russian population there stood up and fought them. There was supposed to be a peace settlement in 2015 called the Minsk Accords. Ukraine signed it together with France and Germany. Russia was there as a guarantor. The Russians basically said, look, the Russian people of Donbass, they're part of Ukraine. We don't want them. We just want to protect their rights. So what we need is an agreement where they have a certain amount of autonomy so they can speak their language, celebrate their religion, read their literature, that Russian doesn't become illegal being a Russian. And that was the agreement. But Ukraine never signed it for 8 years. Instead, they bombarded the Donbass, killing 14,000 people. There's an infamous video clip of Petro Poroshenko, who was the former president of Ukraine, bragging. He said, Ukrainian children will go to kindergarten. The Russian children in the Donbass will cower in basements as we shell them. And then he admitted, we never wanted to implement the Minsk peace agreement. We were using that as a sham to buy time so that NATO could train our army so that we could kick the Russians out. And so that's why Russia went into Ukraine. That's the root cause of this conflict. And now it's turned into something more than just a Russian-Ukrainian conflict. It's become a Russia versus the collective West, the United States and NATO, who are providing tens of billions of dollars worth of heavy equipment, financial assistance, and others to the Ukrainians. And it's a very dangerous situation. It's a tragic situation. I mean, no matter what, no matter how you slice and dice it, a lot of people are dying that didn't need to die on both sides.
Now, before I give a question to my co-host, I wanted to ask you, go back to something you said about how America empowered racist neo-Nazis. Why uh, does the media omit that it happened under the so-called first black president, Barack Obama, which is ironic, right? And also, um, isn't it a spit in the face for America to continue to pour aid into Ukraine, into wars over there when the population here is struggling and the economy is faltering?
I'll answer the second part first because it's the easier one to answer. Um, the Look, the United States is a major power. We're let's put it this way. Let's say I was elected to be town supervisor. Um, but I have a family. I have a house. I have a mortgage to pay. I have bills to pay. I'm in debt, like everybody is, and you're struggling to make your bills. But I also have a responsibility to make sure the town functions. So I have to do business. I have to work with other towns, et cetera. There's a balancing act that has to be made. The United States is a town supervisor. We have people who are struggling, family, and resources have to be put in the family. But there's also a responsibility to work with the rest of the community, the other communities, to make everything work together in harmony. Um, so it's not that I'm against foreign aid, America investing in other places. If you can create stability around the world that manifests itself in a way that's positive for America and positive for this world, that's a good thing. So I'm not against foreign aid. What I'm against is giving money away to stupid causes when the people need help at home. That's the equivalent of me telling my family, I'm sorry, we're gonna have to cut back on Christmas because I have to pay Chuck over here 20 grand to go to Vegas on a gambling spree. They're like, well, does Chuck really need to go to Vegas on a gambling spree? Nope. But I'm going to give him all our money so he can do it. And you guys have to tighten your belts. That's the equivalent of what we're doing to Ukraine, putting all that money into Ukraine in a really in a cause that should never be supported, because I'm going to get to part one in a second. We should never be underwriting Nazis, ever. I have relatives who fought and died in World War II fighting Nazis. It was a serious thing. There's a reason why we went to war against Nazi Germany. And it's because it's an odious ideology. And white supremacy, any supremacy, any concept of racial superiority, where one human is better than another human because of the color of their skin or some other thing, should never be supported by the United States whatsoever. And yet that's what we're doing in Ukraine. We're supporting the same ideology that Adolf Hitler supported, same concept of racial supremacy, racial superiority. I can get away with it because if I go to Ukraine, I'm sort of the same skin color. And if I pretend to speak their language, I might be able to blend in. You won't. If you went to Ukraine right now, you'd automatically, the moment you stepped off the airplane, you'd be a subhuman. They would treat you like garbage. They would treat you less than garbage. They give garbage more respect than they give black people. And yet we're giving money to them. It's wrong. The Obama administration is to blame. Let's just be straight up honest about this. The Obama administration was behind the coup d'etat in February of 2014 that brought the Banderists into, when I say Banderists, I mean the Western Ukrainian nationalists who support the ideology of Stepan Bandera, who fought on the side of Adolf Hitler in World War II. They brought them into power. They empowered them for the purpose of getting rid of Viktor Yanukovych. It's not unique to Ukraine. I'll give you an example. And again, I don't want to. The popular narrative is that on 9/11, 19 men affiliated with Al Qaeda hijacked 4 airplanes, flew them into buildings. We can. I want to put that aside because I don't want to talk. I just want to talk about Al Qaeda, an organization that I don't want to get you kicked off of YouTube. Al Qaeda is an organization that is sworn to hate America. They're out there fighting to hate America. Okay, let's say we believe that. And we went to war about it. The global war on terror is all about fighting Al Qaeda. But in Syria, we were able to give Al Qaeda $12 billion worth of weaponry because we hated them less than we hated Assad, who never attacked us. So we're given, and the point I'm trying to make is we claim something's evil. We say it's the most evil thing on the world, but then we give them money to get rid of what we claim is a bigger evil. So I don't think anybody was saying that Stepan Bandera is a good guy. but we empowered his believers, his supporters, to get rid of Viktor Yanukovych, who was the democratically elected president of Ukraine, because Yanukovych was leaning towards Russia. We didn't want that. So we had to get rid of him because apparently it's our business about how other countries govern themselves. So we brought these people in power, and then we did nothing while they started to carry out their hate against people they viewed as subhumans. This was done under Obama. Now, it was so egregious. In 2015, we began training the Ukrainian military. But the trainers that were going there were proud. They're saying, hey, we're training this guy how to shoot this missile. We're shooting this. And journalists came and took pictures. And then they looked at the photographs and they said, why is that Ukrainian got a swastika on his helmet? Why is that Ukrainian on his arm here got a big old Adolf Hitler portrait? What's going on here? And then people did research and they said, oh, they're from the Azov battalion. It's not really a battalion. They use the name, but it's about 30,000 of them altogether. And we're training them because they're considered the elite forces of Ukraine. So they get the training first. So we're over there training Nazis, literal Nazis, guys with swastikas, guys who pose with the Nazi flag, guys who hold torchlight ceremonies and go Sig Heil, Sig Heil, those kind of Nazis. We're training them. And some congressmen said, whoa, that's not good. So they tried to put language in the defense appropriations bill that said no money can be used to train the Azov battalion because they're Nazis. The reason why I bring this up is it's not like we didn't know what they were. Congress knew exactly what they were. They were giving them money, but they said no money for the Nazis. And we did that for a number of years until Russia invaded Ukraine. Suddenly, we forgot there were Nazis in Ukraine. It was like, what? No, Azov. No, you know what just happened in September? Congress invited 4 Azov Nazis to visit them in Congress and embrace them. They auctioned off patches with Nazi symbology and called it the money's being raised for freedom. It's not being raised for freedom. It's being raised for white supremacy. Congress empowered Ukrainian white supremacists in the people's house. That's how insane this is. And, Obama was the first, black president. People joke about Biden being the second. I guess he would actually be the third. I think Bill Clinton was the first black president, then Obama, then Biden. But here we got, Biden, who's supposed to be all, me and Barry were buddies, and boom. Well, they are buddies because they both believe in supporting Nazis. And, I don't want to make this racist because I'm one of these idiots that actually believes that all people are equal. And I know that'll probably get us kicked off YouTube too. But the fact is, it's not just blacks who should be offended by this. Jews should be offended by this. Christians should be offended by this. White people should be offended by this. Yellow people, brown people, anybody, all humanity should be offended by the fact that the United States is pouring money, billions of dollars, into supporting this white supremacist group. And then we invite them into Congress and we treat them like heroes. Heroes. These are people who actually murdered people. These aren't innocent. These are the commanders of the Azov battalion. There's videotapes of them literally raping Russian women to death. And we brought them in to Congress and we embrace them and we treat them like heroes. This is disgusting. It debases the country. It debases the American people. It debases everything we stand for. Kick me off YouTube for that.
I'll give a question to my co-host because I know he's waiting to ask a question. So Rashid, it's Rashid and Rashid. So Rashid, you can ask the question.
Morning to you, Mr. Scott. We've been following your history for a good while. We know exactly what you're saying. Also, what the leadership of America, as what you were just saying, what is do they actually think that they're going to defeat Russia and run Putin out? Or is this some other kind of a ploy to do something else? Because Russia is a tough nut. Russia is not Iraq.
No.
You ain't going to roll in and bomb up Russia and they sit back and just say, oh, wow, the bombs are flying. Russia
we quit.
is going to fight back.
Yeah. No, I agree. First of all, let me start with this. This is just my premise, having been in the U.S. government at a variety of levels, and even though I wasn't senior, I worked with very senior levels. I've been in the White House, the Situation Room, and all that. Anytime people try to get into conspiracy theories about the U.S. government, and these are really complex theories about this happening, that, I always go, time out. They ain't that good. Okay, if they were that good, we'd be winning all the time. The fact is we're losing, and then we try to explain the loss by some conspiracy theory. We're not that good. We're not that clever. This is more about just naked power. This isn't, somebody coming in and trying to do clever little tricks to undermine. This is brute force. That's how America operates. Brute force, in your face. We lie all the time, but that's not conspiracy. That's just because we lie. What are we doing with Russia? Look, as I said, when the Soviet Union collapsed, we spent the decade of the 90s destroying that nation. I have relatives who lived in Russia at the time. I have friends that lived in Russia at the time. And it was horrible. Literally, it was horrible. They lost their pensions. There was no hope. The society was just crumbling, everything. Imagine, I don't have to tell anybody anything. It's bad. It was bad. And Putin stepped up in 1999 and said, I'm going to change this. And he didn't say, I'm going to change this by robbing these people, invading these people. He said, I'm going to change it by bringing pride back into Russia, by having Russians stand back up and be counted. And he did that. He made Russia, I have to be careful because I always say, stand up like a man, but I don't want to insult any women out there. Stand up like a person, like a human. Be counted as a human being. And that's what Russia was trying to do. But that's not what the United States wanted. We liked Russia being defeated. We wanted to break Russia up into its component parts. And Russia didn't want any part of that. So when you say, do we think we can beat Russia? Here's the problem. What makes us think? I mean, I'm not talking about the physiological aspect of the brain working. It's based upon, it's like a computer. It's only as good as the data that's put into it. You can only get a computer to do what a programmer tells it to do. So people are the same way. If you tell people certain things and they're programmed to believe certain things, then and those certain things they're programmed to believe aren't the truth. They're going to believe the lie. And when the Soviet Union went away, prior to the Soviet Union, I was involved with a class of people that are just fantastic. We call them foreign area officers. They're professional military officers who went to training for language. They became fluent in a language of a given place in the world. Then they went and got a graduate degree, and then they went and they did immersive training in the part of the world they're at. So you could be a foreign area officer in Latin America, you could be a foreign area officer in Europe, or you could be a Soviet foreign area officer. And these guys I worked with, the Soviet foreign area officers, were genuine experts in the Soviet Union. They knew the language, they knew the history of the culture. That doesn't mean they were buddy-buddy with them. Most of them were trying, like me, to kill them. But at least, the idea of knowing your enemy, and was based upon a deep understanding of the real history, what really makes it. Because if you can't solve a problem unless you first properly define the problem. Because if you're solving a problem that you haven't properly defined, you're not solving anything. You're just wasting time and effort. These people could define the Russian problem, and then we would seek solutions. Then the Soviet Union went away, and we stopped viewing the Soviet, because you know what makes Americans respect other cultures? Fear. See, if we respect them, if we're afraid of them, then we want to know about them. We want to know the truth about them. But the moment we stop fearing somebody, we stop respecting them. And the moment we stop respecting them, we stop wanting to know about them, because we don't really care about them. We just want to know how we can use them, abuse them, exploit them. And so we went from wanting to study Russia to wanting to exploit Russia. And that creates a whole different mindset. The people that came after, who went through all these education programs, were no longer focused on learning about their enemy, because we feared the enemy and we had to know about them so we could defeat them. It went to, how can I best exploit these people? What are their weaknesses, their vulnerabilities that I can exploit? We didn't care about their history, their culture, anything. It was an immediate capitalist-driven, how do I get as much money out of Russia into my pockets as quick as possible? And so what used to be called a Russian expert stopped being a Russian expert. It became an exploitation expert. It became, something different. And then Putin came in, and Putin said, "I'm not playing this game anymore." And so all of our Russian experts today are what I call Putin whisperers. The horse whisperers, the people who go up to horses and the horse does anything they want. The Putin whisperers are people who go up to American politicians and go, Putin, 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 Putin. And suddenly the guy, we hate Putin, we hate Putin, we hate Putin. Blame everything on Putin. You're paying a high amount of gas at the pump. It's Putin's gas tax. You have a bad day. Putin did it. Bird pooped on your windshield. Putin made the bird poop on your windshield. Putin is responsible for everything bad in the world, and people believe it because they're programmed to believe it. Turn on mainstream TV and see what they tell you. And I'm telling you that is so far removed from reality, it's not even funny. The truth is so far different. But, so if the American people empowered themselves, and then they heard the American government say, we have to confront Russia, we have to defeat Russia, most American people go, question, why? Why do we want to do this? And they're not that weak. These guys actually fought a war where they took 27 million casualties. I think they know how to take a punch. And I think as Nazi Germany, they know how to punch back. I don't think we want to get in a ring with these guys. This is like me at 60 trying to get in the ring with Mike Tyson at his prime. Don't want to do it. Bad idea. Not going to happen. So, but nobody's thinking this way. We've been programmed. You turn on TV to learn to hate Russia for the most simplistic reasons. We don't know anything about. That's why I said, remember early on when I went over there, living amongst them for a couple of years was one of the best experiences, because I learned that they were people, that they're real. They're not a cartoon character. They're not Boris and Natasha from Bullwinkle. These are real people. These are humans. They invited me in their home for New Year's. And when the guy opened it up, houses are intimate things, because, if you walk around my house right now, you're going to see a pigsty, but it's going to be the reality of my home. I have 3 dogs, I have 3 cats, I have 2 daughters. I can't keep the home clean all the time. That chair needs to have the upholstery fixed. I could just point out the things that need to happen. So, and what it means is this is the reality of my life. So when I invite you into my home, I'm exposing my vulnerabilities. I'm saying, this is who I am. I didn't have a chance to clean up my house. I didn't create that false impression. This is who I am. This is what I am. And I'm trusting you to accept that. These people let me into their homes. And, as an American coming from a society where, we have a house, 2 cars, and all this kind of stuff, to be invited into a Soviet home where we're really talking about a small 2-room apartment for a whole family of 4. All their vulnerabilities are laid out there, and they invited me in. They weren't shy about it. They said, this is who we are. And then I spent the evening with them, drinking tea, drinking a little bit of vodka, eating the food. And these were wonderful people. They brought their neighbors in. I got to meet them. You got to see them tell jokes. You got to see them interact. And you went, wow, this is just like an American family, except they're speaking Russian. But it's the same thing. And it was an eye-opener. And then I read the newspapers, I talked with people, and I learned a lot about their society so that I could appreciate their history, their culture, because they are different. Russians are Russians, Americans are Americans. We're not, we have different backgrounds, but when you respect them, when you learn about them and you respect it, different isn't bad. Different's actually wonderful. I'd hate to travel the world to go to places that look just like where I came from. When I travel the world, I want to meet interesting people. I want to meet people that have interesting cultures, and all cultures are interesting. If I've never met it, I want to learn about it, absorb it. Doesn't mean I want to be them, but I want to visit with them. I want to experience them. It's a good thing to be different, but you have to respect them to do that. There has to be respect. You have to view them as humans, deserving of the same rights that you have as a human. And we've forgotten how to do that with Russians. We view them as somehow less than human. And some of the stuff you read on social media is just disgusting about how we treat the Russians, how we denigrate them. And I blame that on the elite, because the elite is the people who have the PhDs, they know better. It's not like they can say, well, we were deceived. No, you have the PhD. You went to university. You had the opportunity to study this, but you chose to play the game. You chose to play the game of, if I want to get promoted within the system, I have to become a Putin whisperer. You chose not to be intellectually honest, not to be a righteous person and learn the truth and head down the path of truth. Because the path of truth in the American system doesn't lead upward. It leads at best parallel. More often than not, it leads down. But that's the path a righteous person takes. The people that sell out are the people that buy into the lie. And with Russia, unfortunately, they buy in lie. So yeah, do we believe we can beat Russia? I would tell you, there's no military professional that believes we can beat Russia. I mean, the people that know what I know that, again, like I said, if I'm going to fight Mike Tyson, I better start training like Mike Tyson. And we haven't been. I mean, we used to. I have to tell you right now, when I was in the Marine Corps, I'd get in a ring with anybody. But me and my Marines would get in a ring with anybody, and we'd win. We'd win. Why? Because I spent 220 days in the field training in realistic live fire conditions to fight the Russian enemy under, the real Russian enemy, how they really were arrayed. And we trained. And nothing comes easy. I mean, you can be a good boxer, then you take 6 months off. You ain't a good boxer anymore. You're fat. To be a good Marine, you got to train all the time. It never stops, ever stops, never stops. Second you stop, you die. We used to do that. We don't do that anymore. We don't have that mindset. We don't have that money. We don't have that budget. So our military, first of all, we spent 20 years running around the Middle East, kicking down doors of civilian homes in Iraq and killing herders and farmers in Afghanistan. I know there's some bad guys out there that we killed too, but by and large, we weren't playing on the big stage. We were playing on the little stage, and we got beat. But the thing is, we forgot how to fight on the big stage, and today we don't know it. Now we're looking at what Russia's doing in Ukraine. We can't fight that war. We don't know how to fight that war. We only know how to go in and kick down doors in Iraq. We don't know how to put 300,000 men online with tanks and artillery in Ukraine like the Russians and Ukrainians are doing.
So do you think the reason America continues to provoke Russia is due to a psyche of exceptionalism and being inebriated off of the power and the influence that the U.S. empire used to have?
Well, it's not just that. Yes, I mean, we are in many ways living in the past, but there's a reality of it too. Let's put it this way. You know that thing we call the American dream that very few people have, a lot of people want to have, and some people will never have? It's based upon our nation consuming X amount of resources because it's expensive to have the American lifestyle. We live expensively. But when you take a look at the resources America has, it's X minus whatever number you want to give. Where do we get that number? From the world. And we can't get it at market prices because then we couldn't live the American dream. The American dream is about living with affordability. So we have to get things at less than market value. Now, how many people, when they go into business, say, I'm willing to sell my inventory at a loss? No one. But we expect the world to sell their inventory to us at a loss. You have to sell it cheap. And if you're not willing to sell it cheap, then we will overthrow your government and replace it with a government that's willing to sell it cheap. We will manipulate your economy. We will sanction you. We will bully you. We will invade you. We will occupy you. We will kill you. That's the American way of interacting with the world. We aren't the friends of anybody. Nobody is our friend. Everybody is a mark. And we're the con man, running around, running the greatest con on earth. And when the con doesn't work, then we become the hitman. And that's just the way America operates in the world today.
I remember John McCain laughing about how weak the Russian military was. That's the mindset of the leadership of America, that once we got them down, they're going to stay down. And like you say, the military understands that you just can't go and slap Russia down.
No, the military, again, I mean, there's a difference between a sports fan and an athlete. Sports fan sits in the background in the cheap seats and just throws shots all over the place. That's a bad call. You're a moron. Why did you throw it that way? The athlete knows exactly what the heck's going down there. My knee's hurting right now. I took a shot 2 plays ago. I can't put full weight on that. I can't pivot on my ankle. I got a little sore in my arm here. Tackle's not holding that block long enough. They know exactly what's going on. Even on the losing team, they really know what's going on. So the military are the athletes. The American people and the politicians are the fans. And we sit back there and kick their butts. You can kick their butts. But the military's going, you can't kick anybody's butt with this offensive line. Okay, we're going to have to get a whole new offensive line here. You might even need a new quarterback. The military knows exactly what's going on. And that's why no one in the military, again, that doesn't mean that when you put a camera, microphone in front of the athlete, we're going to give it the best shot. You can win on any game, da, da, da. So the military is going to say all that stuff around the camera. But back amongst the team, they're like, boys, we can't beat them unless we change something. We got to change something. So the military is looking at Russia right now going, as you said, that's a tough nut. We ain't cracking that nut with the nutcracker we got. We got to come up with a new nutcracker before. And they're trying to tell the politicians, don't get ahead of your skis here. Don't get too far ahead because you're writing checks that our body can't cash right now. What we need you to do is tone it down a little bit. And that's why you see both the politicians and the military always say, we are not going to put boots on the ground in Ukraine. That the last thing we want is a direct confrontation with the Russians. But we have this belief that everything American is great and everything Russian is bad. I mean, I read something in the New York Times, an article about how Ukraine is winning artillery supremacy over the Russians. I went, really? Given the fact that the Russians pretty much invented modern artillery-based warfare, how did this happen? They said, well, they've got American systems, the M777, the HIMARS, and they're running around and they're with these few systems and they're just duking and jabbing and boom and killing, boom, 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 boom. And they go, and the Russians got nothing that can touch it. I said, really? The Russians don't have satellite-guided artillery shells. Really? I think they do. I think they have more of them than we do. I think they have systems that are longer range than we are. I think they have rocket systems that are more accurate than the HIMARS. I think that the Ukrainians are doing a good job. Look, I'm never going to take the point away from the Ukrainians. It's like when you play a team, you want to beat them, but if the dude tackles you and hits you hard, you walk up and go, "That's a good hit." That dude can hit. And if you're trying to run an in around and the defensive end blows it away, takes down your guy, you go, "That boy can play. We're gonna run around him. We're not gonna run through him." I mean, you respect the opponent when they do well, and no matter where you stand in this conflict, you have to respect the Ukrainian army. I mean, they are fighting and they are skilled and they have the ability to inflict harm on the Russians, and they are. This isn't a one-sided fight. This is a street fight. It's just the Russians are better at it than the Ukrainians are, but the Ukrainians, give as well. But the reality is that all the equipment we've given Ukraine isn't enough to change the reality on the battlefield, that the Russians are winning. But we can't admit that to the American people. See, because if we said we just spent $50 billion giving the Ukrainians all this equipment and it ain't good enough, and that's the best we got. We don't have anything more. We gave it all to Ukrainians and they're getting beat. Now you want to come back and say, because let me tell you what's going to happen after this election. We got the midterm coming up. Republicans are going to sweep the House. I don't know if they're going to take the Senate or not. That's a coin toss. But they're going to take the House. And in the way the American system of government works, the House controls the purse. They got the money. And so Republicans are going to sweep it. And now Biden, knowing that come January, the Republican Congress is going to go thumbs down on big Ukrainian expenditures. He's going to try and jam a $40 to $60 billion aid package through Congress between November and January. There's going to be a whole bunch of discussion. So the media, because the media is not independent journalism, the media is the mouthpiece of the government. So the New York Times is running stories now about how great this assistance is. Hey, look, all those artillery pieces they gave, supremacy on the battlefield. I don't think so. But you don't want to tell the American people the truth because, God forbid, the American people actually empower themselves with knowledge and information and vote accordingly. You have to lie to the American people and pretend that they're dumb enough to believe the lie. And so you tell them all this equipment we're giving is having a meaningful impact on the battlefield so that when we ask for more, you'll support it. But the truth is, the equipment that we're giving the Ukrainians isn't having a meaningful impact on the battlefield. It's only resulting in deaths of tens of thousands of more Ukrainians, thousands of more Russians. It's a wasted money. It's wasted life. It's a tragedy for all people involved. And it's high time the American people wake up and understand that our money is blood money. That every time we approve a package like this, we're killing husbands, fathers, brothers, sisters, mothers. It should bring tears to American people's eyes. We froze. I think YouTube nuked us. You're muted. You're muted. You're muted. Click the button there.
Okay, what
There
about
you,
now? Okay.
Now you got it. Yeah, there we go.
Okay, let's get into the
I had to mute him for a second. I have to say YouTube is messing with, again, I told you once we do the show, it always happens.
I was a bad boy. I said some things I shouldn't have said, so I apologize.
And at the same time, we have the internet router, and then we have a backup internet router, and all of them showing strong signals. So we know it's not the internet problem. So we know it has to be on the server side, which is YouTube or StreamYard. But Rashid, before you say something, it was a question I wanted to ask him before I was knocked off the air, before they froze the whole thing, and then I'll let you continue along your line of thing. We were talking about, and you mentioned that the United States at this point can't beat Russia on the battlefield. What was General Petraeus saying that they would annihilate the Russian forces, and why is the United States now mentioning that there are troops on the ground in Ukraine, quote unquote, servicing equipment, and why is the United States sending the 101st Airborne to Ukraine's border?
Let's start with Petraeus, but when we talk about Petraeus, why don't we just talk about all of the former generals who now work for CNN, MSNBC, Fox, etc. First of all, let's start with they're no longer in the military. So when they speak, they aren't speaking for the military. Two, let's understand this. Having done this before, I used to be one of these talking heads on TV. And I have to tell you, it's easy money. It's really easy money. All you have to do is talk. Now the question is, what do you choose to talk about? I ended up getting fired each time because I didn't play the game. I talked about what I thought was true, and that didn't match their message. But if it's easy money, then you play the game. These guys aren't brought on. They've changed the contract. They used to write you a check every month. So basically, they paid you no matter how much they used you. And what they found is people like me would say things they didn't want. They wouldn't put me on the air, but they had to pay me anyways. They said that's a bad business model. So the new business model is you get paid by appearance. And you only appear after you go through the pre-interview screening process with the producer. And the producer will call you up and say, this is a story, this is what we're saying, I need to hear your talking points on this. And then if you sell them good enough talking points, you get your good little boy and you get to go on air. And then you have to say your little talking points because you're a good little boy and you want your little paycheck. But if you give the bad answers, then the producer says, oh, I'm sorry, we're not doing that segment anymore. Boom. And if you give bad answers enough, they just stop calling you. And then you have to figure out what you have to say. So none of these guys are talking to, I know these guys are smarter than what they appear to be on TV. On TV, they're literally the dumbest people on the face of the earth. And I mean that. Petraeus, Mark Hertling, Spider Marks, all these generals, Ben Hodges. I'll debate you anytime, any place, in any public forum, and I'll take you apart. Because the stuff you're saying on TV is so far removed from reality, and you can't sustain it. But the thing is, you know you can't sustain it, but you're a prisoner to the money. You're a prisoner to, because it's not just the money for TV. These guys make a living speaking. They go out and they get paid a month's salary for 1 hour speech. And the way you attract business is to spew this nonsense, because the points that the producers are writing are points written by special interest groups who fund CNN and others. And these special interest groups then have different communities around the country that will pay people $30,000 to appear to speak for 1 hour. And I said a month's salary. That ain't my month's salary, but it's for the well-to-do people maybe. But that's how they earn a living. So it's not just saying stuff you get on air. getting on air gets you the exposure necessary to sustain the brand that you make running around giving speeches where you say the same garbage. You don't tell the truth. So this is a system of lies, how to tell lies. So that's that. But they're just wrong. All the generals are just dead wrong on what they're saying. And I went off on that so much. Tell me the rest of the question, because I'm old and I'm senile and sometimes my memory slips.
Also, why now did the United States, quote unquote, name drop the troops being in Ukraine servicing weapons?
I got it. I got it. Look, when I was in the Marine Corps, and when my dad was stationed in Germany, we had 300,000 Americans stationed there. 300,000. That's troops. The community I lived in, we had 75,000 American civilians living there. It was an American city. That's the presence that we had in Europe at the time. Since that time, we've dropped it, and we were down to under 60,000 troops just a couple years ago. No heavy armored vehicles, nothing. It was a light armored brigade. We got rid of all our tanks, nothing. And then the Russia thing came up, and we realized that we didn't have enough force in Europe. And it's very expensive. We can't put 300,000 troops there. So what we did is a presence force. We started rotating in a heavy armored brigade, about 5,000 guys, a couple hundred tanks, and we'd rotate them in. They go around Europe and make a presence. Hi, we're Americans. We got American tanks. Don't you feel really good? We're going to train with you a little bit. It's like a pro boxer coming in and sparring at different gyms. Hey, I'm going to go to Mike's gym. Spar. Go over to the gym. Hey, how you doing? We're all sparring. We're all fighters, right? You ain't fighters. You got a heavyweight coming in and shadow boxing you with you for a few minutes and then leaves. You ain't a prize fighter, okay? You think you are because you were shadow boxing with a heavyweight guy. And that's what the Americans are doing, going in there and making Europe feel good. But then the reality is that while we can bring in 5,000 guys and say 300 tanks and 18 artillery pieces, the Russians, have 1 million guys and 10,000 tanks and a whole bunch of artillery pieces. So no matter what we do, always at the end, I keep bringing up Mike Tyson only because he's powerful. I should probably say Ali. I should probably say somebody better. But the reality is we're sitting there doing this, and we look over in the opponent's gym, and that monster's in there bench pressing 700 pounds, doing 5 million sit-ups. He's hitting slabs of raw meat. He's doing the Rocky thing, and you're just like, holy cow. Okay, hey, that's what we're doing. The 101st Airborne is there right now as a feel-good moment. No disrespect to the men and women of the 101st Airborne. I'm sure they think they're really, really good. I never thought they were really, really good because, first of all, they were Army. And I don't have that high regard for the Army. That's just because I'm a Marine. That's my own prejudice. I admit it. The Army is actually pretty good, and they have some professional people. But it's a light infantry unit. Their specialty is air mobility. You get into a helicopter, and the helicopter can move you as a unit. Because the problem with paratroopers is you got to jump out of perfectly good airplanes. Right off the bat, that's a problem. And then so you got to find people dumb enough to do that. And then they come down, they get scattered out on the ground, and then they have to organize themselves, and they can only fight with that which they bring with them. And this is good if you're fighting, I don't know what, taking an airfield for a little while or holding a little piece of terrain. But as we learned in World War II in the Battle of Arnhem, when the British jumped in, that bridge too far moment, and then the Nazis came up with the tanks, light infantry versus tanks is not the kind of fight you want to be in. And here's the other thing. Helicopters, they fly. I'm smart enough to know that. And but the Russians have this thing called air defense systems. They're actually called integrated air defense systems, and they're the most modern and capable in the world. And they shoot down helicopters for a living, and they shoot down airplanes for a living. So now you have an air mobility unit that's going to take on the Russians, fly into an area controlled by the Russians. None of those helicopters will get in alive. None of them will get out, and all the infantry on board will die. And we know this. Again, we go back to what I tell you. The military guys are looking at it going, yeah, they ain't fighting the Russians with that. But we don't have to tell the Europeans that. We say, this is 101st Airborne Division, second Brigade, M60 helicopters, air mobility, hurrah, hurrah. And we show them we were soldiers once and young, Mel Gibson movie. We show that. See this is what air mobile does. And if I were the Romanians, I go, yeah, but see the North Vietnamese, they're charging and killing you guys. I mean, and the Russians have tanks, and they didn't have tanks. I don't know. But no, that's what we're doing. We're trying to make people feel good. That's all it is. There's no real military capability there. and there can't be because it's too expensive. We don't have the ability. It takes 6 months for us to get a heavy armored brigade ready to go to Europe for a 6 month to a year long rotation. 6 months. That's not rapid mobility. Now, to fight the Russians, we would need to have around 10 heavy brigades minimum. We can't do it. We literally cannot do it. So this is all fake. This is all fake that's going on. It's all bluster. It's all a bluff. But we're not. Now you said, well, okay, if it's fake, why are we putting troops on the ground in Ukraine? Those boots you talked about. Those aren't combat troops. Listen to what they said about them. They're on-site inspectors. I used to be an on-site inspector. They're not auditors. They're not inspector general people. They're on-site inspectors, which means there's a forensic aspect to the work they're doing. Their job is to track the weapons that we have given to the Ukrainians, because a lot of these weapons are appearing on the black market in Europe so that terrorists and criminals can buy them. Weapons like the Javelin anti-tank weapon, man-portable, easily put in the back of a car. Weapons like the Stinger anti-air missile, man-portable, easily put in the back of a car. Grenades, mines, other high explosives, automatic weapons, ammunition, all put in the back of a car, smuggled back into Europe, sold on the black market. A lot of this is appearing on what they call the dark web, sold on the internet. And do you remember we talked earlier about what's going to happen after this election, where Biden's going to try to jam $40 to $60 billion worth of goods in there? Well, here's what's going to happen. Somebody's going to ask a question. Hey, before we give them $60 billion of new stuff, can you tell me what happened to all that old stuff? Because we've heard that some of it's appeared in the black market. And if the answer is we don't have any idea, nobody's going to vote for that new stuff. So why these guys are on the ground now is the Pentagon's trying to get ahead of the game. They're putting these on-site inspectors on the ground, trying to have the answer to the question that's asked. Now, the answer will be a lie because the Pentagon can't tell the truth, that a lot of this stuff is in the hands of Al-Qaeda, ISIS, and the Cosa Nostra in Europe. And some of it eventually will be used to kill American diplomats or shoot down American civilian aircraft. That's the truth. But we can't tell the truth. What we're going to say is we've done an investigation, and we are comfortable that Ukraine has mostly complied with its obligation to account for the material in question. And then the Congress will say, oh, okay, you answered my question, and I'll approve the answer. But that's what these guys are doing. They're not combat troops. They're not there to even try and intimidate the Russians. They're there for political reasons, to get answers to questions that are going to be asked after the election when Biden tries to jam $60 billion down the American people's throat.
Well, if Russia has escalation dominance in the European theater of war, why does NATO continue to provoke with covert operations against the pipelines, against the bridge, against just targeting Russians? Isn't that insane to do that?
Yes. Yes. I mean, that's a short answer. I'll give you the more complicated answer. First of all, remember ignorance. You're trying to solve a problem that you haven't properly defined. Before we had the military problem, we thought we could win this whole conflict by economic sanctions. We thought we could cut off Russian energy and just starve the Russian people into submission. We honestly believed that. That's why we imposed all these sanctions up front. We thought that we were going to break the back of the Russian people, break the back of the Russian economy, and bring down Putin that way. Well, here's the problem. You know, we a lot of people mock John McCain, our favorite former senator, like to mock Russia as a nothing but a nation disguised, or a gas station disguised as a nation. That's all they are. It's a gas station disguised as a nation. Okay, John, I understand that, but when you're an automobile on a super highway and you need that gas and you're out of gas, maybe you understand that it's better to be a gas station disguised as a nation than an automobile disguised as a loser, because that's what you are, John. You're a loser. You think you know energy security better than Russia? You think you know how to do energy better than the gas station? They know how to do it better than you, and you came in and you tried to play a game on them, and they flipped the script, and now it's Europe that's absolutely in this. France. Every American would know this. They don't know that maybe it comes from France, but you've heard of Durex, the unbreakable glass? Everything's Durex. Durex this, Durex that, Durastix. Well, it's made in France in a big old glass factory. They had to shut down production for 5 months. They just did it today. They announced it. Why? Can't afford to stay in business because we cut them off from Russian gas. See, Russian gas cost them, I think they said it was their expense was 3 million euros a month for energy costs. But now they cut us Russian gas, the expense went to 15 million euros a month. They can't stay in business. So they have to shut down. And German steel mills and aluminum smelters are shutting down. All of Europe shutting down. Nobody can afford to stay in business. Why? Because the sanctions didn't work. The sanctions didn't work. But here's the thing. Imagine you're a desperate person. I don't know if you've ever been to Vegas. I probably think that's an old Oakland Raiders hat.
I done been to Vegas.
All right. Well, everybody knows Vegas, and so you've seen the pathetic guys. They look a lot like me. They're at the craps table or at the blackjack table, and they come in with $100 worth of chips, and 30 minutes later it's gone. So they stumble over to the ATM, and they had promised their wife they were only going to have a $500 budget, but they grab it and they say, I got to win that $100 back. So I doubled down. They lost it. Now they can double down. I lost it. Now they going, I'm gonna go ahead and take out of the savings but I want it back and put it back. She'll never know. And the point I'm getting at is you're doubling down on failure in a game you'll never win. And that's NATO and the United States on the sanction thing of Russian energy. We're doubling down on failure. We failed. Now the smart person says, I failed.
Cut your losses.
Cut your losses, learn your lesson, go do something else. But the desperate person doubles down and says, no, I'm going to put it all in. Next thing you know, you got the children's college fund, the mortgage, everything.
The
all
house,
there. Everything gone, and it's all gone, finished. And that's what they're doing. Think about it. Germany has been trying for years to get the Nord Stream 2 pipeline up and running. They had the Nord Stream 1 pipeline. And let me put it this way. Europe as a whole had a pretty nice gig going. It was a nice place to go to. They had high standard of living. They had free education. Because they paid taxes, but they had free education, free healthcare. Pretty cool place. Why? Where'd they get all that extra money? Because they're buying cheap Russian gas.
Yeah. Matter of fact, isn't that what brought Europe to the standards? What it is? Cheap 100. Russian gas.
Cheap Russian gas. And so America went in and said, oh, no, you can't have that cheap Russian gas. You got to buy the expensive American gas. So we need you to stop
talking about it right now.
Yeah. And the Germans
5 to 7 times. Yeah.
Yeah. We screwed them. Let me tell you this about America. America will never be your friend. We're the friend of nobody. We only care about ourselves. We're the people that run around and shake hands and say we're your friends, but the friendship ends the moment we're not getting what we want from you. The moment you become inconvenient to us, you're not our friend anymore. Look at Germany. They're supposed to be our friend and our ally. But the Germans have told the United States for many years now that they need cheap Russian gas. That's what makes Germany the most, the strongest economy in Europe. The reason why they can pay people high salaries, have high standard of living, all this is cheap Russian gas. It used to also be nuclear energy, but now they say they want to go green. So they got rid of their nuclear plants. They got rid of their coal-fired plants. Cheap Russian gas. That's sort of what makes it happen. We cut it off. They bought into the sanctions. The German people started holding demonstrations in the streets, telling their government, hey, we're not happy with this. We want our jobs. We want that wonderful little German dream life we were living. We need you to turn the gas back on. We need Nord Stream 2 up and running. And the United States is watching this going, Germany, you don't want that Nord Stream 2 stuff. Thank you. And Germany's going, yeah, but our people are hurting. We might want to turn on Nord Stream 2. No, you don't want to do that. Yeah, we do. Blow it up. Boom. We blew it up. Took that off the table. Is that how you treat your friends? No. But when is Europe going to realize we're not the friend of anybody? But we lied about the economy. We got that part wrong. But Europe continues to double down on that. And now NATO, NATO is nothing more than a heroin addiction gone bad. It stands for nothing. It used to serve a purpose. NATO used to be the bulwark against Soviet expansion. But when the Soviet Union went away, what is NATO? NATO now became an excuse for America to dominate Europe. And we dominate Europe with the false premise of a Russian threat, the need to maintain a military alliance that nobody can afford. So nobody did. Europe allowed their militaries to drop to nothing. The Germans used to have, a number of armored divisions. Now they have like 2 or 3 armored brigades. But they even can't get these guys out of barracks because they just sit in the barracks. They don't train. They don't maintain their units. They don't do anything. They become this woke society that's incapable of fighting. These aren't the Germans that my granddaddy fought. These are different Germans. They don't know how to fight. And that's the same with all of Europe. But they're addicted to this premise of NATO being strong. So they fool themselves. That's like me. See, I wear these baggy clothes because in my youth, used to wear tight-fitting shirts, and I could look in the mirror and go, yeah, okay, you got it. But the older I get, the more pathetic that got. So I put on the bulky stuff. So now I can look in the mirror and say, underneath there's something, man, you're looking pretty good. That's NATO right now. They're all bulked up with clothes. But if you took off the shirt, it ain't going to be a cut body staring back at you. It's going to be a middle-aged, elderly, fat dude who hasn't been to the gym in God knows how long. That's the reality of NATO. And but they fooled themselves into believing that they're cut. They fooled themselves into believing that they can go there and put up 250. They can't even get 135 up right now. So it's NATO's pathetic, and the United States is to blame because we allowed it to exist. We could have done the honorable thing and said there's no reason for NATO to exist. We could have done the honorable thing and told Europe, hey, now that the Soviet threat's gone away, maybe it's time you learn to stand up on your own feet. Maybe it's time that you learn how to live without us. We'll still be your friends, although America's incapable of being friends of anybody. But see, if we were real friends, we'd say, because that's what a real friend does. A real friend helps their friends to their feet, helps them get established so they can live an independent life. We should have done that with Europe. And had we done that, Europe would be our real friends and they'd do business with us and everything would be prosperous. But instead, we kept Europe weak, dependent upon us. And now we're the ones who've provoked this fight with Russia and Europe's paying the price. I mean, life is not going to be good for the average European this winter. It's going to be very, very bad. As bad as it is for us, it's worse for them.
Well, with the economic situation deteriorating in the Western world and America and NATO continue to provoke Russia on the Ukrainian battlefield, how does this look on the battlefield at this moment, and what do you see happening in the next few weeks to months?
Well, I mean, let's be honest about this. The Russians bit off more than they could chew initially. As good as the Russians are, even Mike Tyson gets in a ring tying one hand behind his back and tying one foot up behind him, hopping around with 1 foot, swinging with his weak arm. He ain't going to win that fight against most real fighters. Russia went in soft, and there were a number of reasons why they did that, but they only allocated 200,000 men. And in the end, by the end of the summer, they were on a 1,200 kilometer front. You say, well, 200, it's about 180 guys per kilometer. That's doable, right? But it's not, because you have to protect the whole rear area as well. You have to, and most of those guys, 200,000 isn't 200,000 combat troops. That includes your communicators, the truck drivers, cooks, your bakers, the candlestick makers. They're all back there in the rear. That only leaves you about 60,000 guys on the front line. And now 60,000 over a 1,200 kilometer front means you got between 30 and 40 guys per kilometer. Now go walk a kilometer and tell me you can hold that line with 30 to 40 guys. You might say, well, I can if I spread them out. Okay, now tell me you're going to hold that line when I put 5,000 tanks up against you. Nope, can't hold that. That's what happened. So Russia had to go into what they call a partial mobilization. They mobilized 300,000 guys. It's actually more than that because they brought in several 100,000 volunteers at the same time, because those Russians are pretty patriotic people. And when the Russian president said, hey, we got to do this, yeah, they mobilized the reservists, but there was a bunch of other people come saying, hey, we want to fight too. We want to fight too. So they're bringing a lot of guys to bring. And the Russians, it's not like they just have these people. The Russians have all these stockpiles of equipment. So the guys that are coming in are going to get all modern tanks, all modern equipment. I mean, this ain't, me showing up at the Indy 500 in my 1969 Malibu. This is them coming in with the Formula One cars ready to race. And the Ukrainians, on the other hand, they built up a fairly decent military over the summer with $53 billion. If you can't build a good-looking race car with $53 billion, don't race cars. Yeah, they built a nice-looking military, modern equipment, well-trained troops, but then they burned it out. All those victories they had came at a very heavy cost. And we don't know the final figures yet, but we're talking of say, 60,000 men engaged, 20 20 to 40,000 are dead or wounded. And the equipment's been blown up. War is hell, man. This ain't Iraq and Afghanistan where we lose 2-3 guys a week. When people die in this war, they die hundreds at a time, thousands at a time. This is real war. This kind of stuff we used to fight in World War II. But they've burned through their reserves. Whatever they received since then, put to the front lines and burned through now. And now Ukraine's desperately looking to the West saying, we need more, we need more. And the West is saying, we ain't got it. Let me give you an example. We gave them the M777 howitzer. It's a 155 millimeter howitzer. Good system. Tough to maintain, but good system. During the Gulf War against Iraq, we fired 60,000 rounds of ammunition for the entire war. And I know the guys are out there pulling the lanyards. They're like, man, it was great. We were firing all day. Boom, 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 60,000 rounds. The Russians fired 60,000 rounds in one day. One day. The Ukrainians are responding with, say, 6,000 rounds a day, which is a very high rate of fire, by the way. We produce, and I'm going to throw out some numbers here, and I'm just using them as an illustration. Anybody who Googles it will say, he's wrong. I know I'm wrong. I'm telling you right up front. Don't use these numbers. These are used for illustrative purposes only. But let's say we in the military, we keep a certain amount of ammunition stockpiled for war. And I'm telling you right now, 60,000 rounds was for the entire Desert Storm. So let's say we have 75,000 rounds earmarked for Europe, for a European conflict. Now, some of this is going to use for training. So as we train, we tend to go into the older stocks. We keep the newer, we use the oldest stuff first, keep the newer stuff there, and we use that. Let's say we crank out, we use 25,000 rounds a year for training. Boom, 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 boom. So I tell my defense industry that we're going to produce 30,000 rounds a year. You see, because I have to account for stuff that doesn't work, et cetera, things. So 30, but basically I want to keep the 75,000 round number good. And I'm replacing what I use for training every year with a couple more for spares. Now we go to the Ukrainians and we give them this artillery system, and we give them, 20,000 rounds. And we think that 20,000 rounds is going to last them 2 months. They come back in 3 days. We used it. Where's the rest? We go, well, shoot. Okay, give them more. Give them more. Next thing you know, that 75,000 rounds that we were planning on to go to war with is down to 15,000. And the fact is right now, if America went to war in Europe, we have ammunition for 2 weeks. That's it. Then we run out of ammo. And our defense industry is not on a wartime footing. So we don't, this isn't a computer game. For all those Call of Duty guys out there, they're like, hey, I know how to play war, and then you say, I got the hack. You see, I can hack in and I can buy equipment because I cheated. It's cheap. I need more ammo. Click, 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 click. Oh, look, I got all the ammo I need. That's how it's done. No, it's not how it's done, guys. You actually have factories that produce this stuff. Now, and the money that's allocated comes from a budget that's debated the year before. So you can't just sit there and say, produce more. It doesn't work that way. Produce more with what? We can increase the rate of production on the line that we have, but you want me to build a new line. That means I have to get that equipment. It's specialty equipment. I have to get it from that German company. Oh, but they're out of business because of the sanctions and the energy. They're not producing that specialty equipment anymore. So that's the reality of it. We are in a world of hurt because we have given away everything to the Ukrainians, and we don't have the ability to replace it in a timely fashion. We put the national security of the United States at risk.
Also, Russia don't have that problem. They don't have to sit up and wait for next year's budget or whatever. From what I understand, their industry is cranking out more and more and more and more weapons. Like you say, the Europeans don't have any more weapons.
No, they've given up. Well, I'm not going to pretend that the Russians, they do have a similar problem because, a lot of their industries are state industries or they're joint stock companies with a heavy state ownership. And so they are responsible for maintaining a profit. So in peacetime, they can't be wasteful in their production. So they do the same thing we do. But the problem with the Russians, and this is our problem, not their problem, is that they know war. And so the Russians sit there and they go, okay, if we're going to fight a war with NATO, we're talking 1 million men, this many tanks, da 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 da. Okay, we have to make sure we produce all that, and then it's going to take 6 months. So we need 6 months worth of ammunition already stockpiled. We need the fuel already stockpiled. They've already stockpiled it. They're ready to play the game. And they're also the kind of people that sit there and say, hey, we think this thing, Putin talks to his guys. Do you guys think NATO is going to kick up in a couple of years? We're going to have a problem? Yeah. Hey, let's up that ammunition production just in case. I need more ammunition production. I need more stuff produced. We don't want to spend the money on those missiles yet. That second production line ready. Yeah, it'll cost us a little bit of money now, but I want that line ready in case we have to go into full production. And they prepared. So now, Putin just gave a speech where he said, we're clicking on defense industry. And their defense industry run around making phone calls saying, where can we find this? The defense industry goes, yes, sir. On button, go. And they are producing stuff at prodigious rates. And I don't think the Russians are going to run out of ammunition. We'll run out of Ukrainians before they run out of ammunition. And I don't mean to smile on that because I come back to war is a serious business, and this war should never have been fought. And every death in this war is a tragic death, except for the Nazis. I will never cry when you kill a Nazi. But anybody else, no problem.
I'm sorry. I wanted to say, so what, in essence, when Putin said that his mission was to disarm the Ukrainian army and to secure Russia's national security, by extension, he's also disarming the United States and NATO.
Well, he didn't mean to do that. We just made it easy for him to do that. Look, demilitarization early on was actually very limited in scope. I've talked to a lot of Russian politicians, Russian generals, to find out what they mean by that, because that's sort of a broad term, demilitarization. They said early on, all they were looking to is to remove the NATO influence. They weren't trying to eliminate the Ukrainian military. They just wanted to get rid of the NATO influence on the Ukrainian military. So initially, the Ukrainian military, if they just stayed in barracks, eventually Russia would have withdrawn and the military would have still been there, as long as the NATO influence is removed, the NATO training bases, the NATO equipment, things of that nature. But now that the Ukrainian army has been turned into a NATO army, demilitarization means the total elimination of the Ukrainian army. That's a tall order. So anybody who thinks that this war is going to end anytime soon, that this war will be over with limited objectives, the Russians have said straight up, we have set the goal of demilitarization, and that goal has never changed, and it's not going to change. This war will only end when we accomplish this mission. So this war will only end when Russia destroys the Ukrainian military, destroys, eliminates, annihilates it. It's gone. There's a lot of fighting left. Denazification is the other one. What does that mean? Originally, it meant that they wanted to get rid of these various units. Remember the Azov battalion we talked about? They have another one called IDAR. They have other units as well. There's a number of them. And these units need to be eliminated. But it's not just eliminating the units. The people that are in it have to be held accountable for their actions. Many of them are murderers, rapists, thugs. And even then, they have to be reprogrammed ideologically. You can't just release them into society. You have to retrain them. And actually, the Russians are doing a pretty good job right now. They just showed some videos where some of these Azov Nazis, some of the young kids, are now appealing for Russian citizenship. And one of the things that they've done is they've agreed to go in and get their Nazi tattoos covered up. And they say, this tattoo doesn't stand for anything anymore. Da, da, da. And they might be smoking dope and lying and all that kind of stuff. But the point is, there's an effort being made to, because the way I would denazify somebody is just up against the wall and apply the 75-cent solution, put a bullet into them. The Russians are at least trying to talk to them, educate them, give them a job, give them a purpose that is different from being a member of a white supremacist group. But now, because NATO, the United States, is training the Nazis, we've empowered the Nazis. And the Russians just called the Zelensky regime a Nazi regime. So when we speak of denazification now, it means getting rid of the entire Ukrainian government. The Russians are going to have to occupy Western Ukraine. This is like saying in order to get rid of the KKK, we got to occupy the South. All right. Now, it's not just occupy the South. You got to go in and you got to take down every single one of those little KKK, I don't know what they call them, clavens or something like that. There's a term they use. You got to get rid of all the grand dragons and all that kind of stuff. You can't just say, we're here, you go home now, don't ever come back. No, they're there. You got to get rid of them. You got to blow. In Western Ukraine, they have statues to this Stepan Bandera dude. He's a national hero. They hold parades where they dress up like Nazi stormtroopers, and they parade with their torches and all. That has to end, and everybody who was involved has to be identified and cleansed. And either cleansed the old-fashioned way, which I don't promote because we're about respect for human life, or cleanse the new Russian way, which is you guys got to go to, we got to talk to you a little bit about what your objectives are in life. And we've got to convince you that you're on the wrong path and you need to be on this path. If not, we can't release you back into society. You're going to have to go to the gulag and take big rocks and make them into small rocks until you have a change of attitude. But that's denazification. It's a big, big deal. And it's going to take a lot of time and a lot of effort. So again, people to think, because there's a lot of talk right now about a negotiated settlement. You hear, especially in the United States now, everybody's talking about it. We weren't talking about negotiated settlement back in the summer because they're like, we're kicking Putin's butt. We're kicking Putin's butt. The only negotiated settlement's going to be when Putin crawls on his knees and begs for surrender. And now Putin's going, yeah, boys, we've been to the gym for a while, ready to bring the fight out. They're like, negotiated settlement, negotiated settlement. Nobody wants to fight. Russia's about to come. Russia's about to get serious. And but Putin doesn't want a negotiated settlement. Putin wants to accomplish what he said he was going to accomplish: denazification, demilitarization, getting NATO out of Ukraine and getting the Nazis out of Ukraine forever. The denazification isn't going to be a temporary step. The Russians are committed to eradicating this disgusting ideology once for all. And the irony is, under normal circumstances, we should be standing side by side with the Russians. This is a good cause, getting rid of these people. But no, we're actually paying them. We're paying their salaries. We're training them. We're paying the salaries of Nazis. We don't just invite them into Congress and treat them like heroes. We pay their salaries.
So what does Ukraine look like at the end of this war, or close to the end of this war? And what would be Russia's reaction with the buildup of NATO and U.S. forces along Belarus and around Ukraine, and threatening to confront Russia, and also making a head fake towards Odessa?
No, well, first of all, there ain't gonna be no head fake to Odessa. The only people talking about Odessa is the Russians, and they ain't a head fake. They're coming in. So Odessa is Russian. It will always be Russian. They're taking it over. They have this enclave called Transnistria up by Moldova. They're going to link up with that, protect it, and they're going to seal off Ukraine from the ocean. You say, what is Ukraine going to look like? It ain't going to look like anything what it currently looks like. They already lost 20% of their territory. They're going to lose at least 20% more. Russia's going to take over Odessa, Kharkov, Nikolaev, Dnipropetrovsk. The fate of Western Ukraine is unknown yet. It ain't going to Poland, but Belarus might come in and govern it during this period of denazification that we're talking about. Ukraine will probably end up being a very small nation, built around the oblasts or districts around Kiev, agricultural based, because all the industry is being taken by Russia. So it'll be sort of a wheat basket, weak nation, and it's their own fault. It didn't have to be this way, but you picked the wrong side. You picked Team America, and Team America isn't about helping Ukraine. Team America is about hurting Russia. So we think that we can sacrifice Ukraine and bring harm to Russia, that Russia will be so weak after this that Russia will never be able to confront NATO or anything else. And NATO is talking about, they need 300,000 troops. Now, look how quick Russia got 300,000 troops ginned up. Putin said last month, I need 300,000 troops. Month and a half later, he's got 300,000 troops. Stoltenberg in June said, we need 300,000 troops. And NATO's still going, what? What? You want to, what? Whose troops? Who's going to pay for this? Where are we going to get the money? What equipment?
Among themselves.
Yeah. They're just, when Stoltenberg gave that announcement, half the defense ministers of Europe went, what's 300,000 troops? The Germans especially, because the Germans had to scrape and scrabble and cannibalize units to get this battalion that they sent up to Lithuania. And if you know anything about history and European history, the notion of a German battalion in Lithuania should bother you. But they're there. There they are, as if history never happened. But now Stoltenberg said, we want to turn all of these battalions into brigades, which basically means you got to triple the size of the unit. The Germans are going, we went bankrupt getting the battalion there, and now you want a brigade. We can't do that. And meanwhile, the German leaders going, we want to spend $100 billion to rebuild the German military. Okay, that means you have to buy things called tanks. Last time I checked, tanks were made of metal that comes from steel mills that have smelters that require gas to burn, Russian gas, cheap Russian gas. You don't got that anymore. You ain't making steel, you ain't making tanks, you ain't making army divisions of Germany. You're just out of luck. And that's all of Europe right now. All of Europe's just out of luck. That's why the Poles, this is a story that came out yesterday. The Poles were told to get rid of all their old Soviet tanks and give them to the Ukrainians. Give them all to the Ukrainians. And the Poles went, okay, but then we'd like some of those American M1 tanks. They're pretty sexy. We want the M1 tanks. And the Americans went, give them the T-72s. We'll talk about it later. And then they gave the T-72s, and the Americans went, we're not giving you any tanks. So the Poles went
out of luck.
So the Poles went, okay, hey, South Korea, pretty good tank. We'd like to spend $6 billion on your equipment. And the Americans are going, wait, you're supposed to spend that money on our stuff. Nope. So the Poles are going there, and I think a lot of Europeans are going to start looking at South Korea to get their equipment. But even then, that takes long lead times. Here's the Russian hope. The Russians started this before they invaded Ukraine. They actually put forward treaties, draft treaties. One was given to NATO, one was given to the United States on December 17th of last year. These treaties talked about what they called a European security framework, a new European security framework. Not that it wasn't asking for a NATO surrender. It was saying, how can we live together in a way that we both feel comfortable, that you don't threaten us and we don't threaten you? How can we do that? And this is what we put on the table, and we want to talk about this. And we said, no, can't talk about it at all. Well, here's the funny thing. The Americans now are starting to say, we need to start looking at the Democrats. They had 30 progressive members, the Progressive Caucus, who aren't progressive, but that doesn't matter. They put a letter out to Biden. They said, we're giving all this money there, but we also have to talk about an off-ramp, a diplomatic off-ramp. And all these guys are now saying this off-ramp has to, address, European security framework. I'm like, wait a minute. Why are you saying that now? In December, you were dismissive. You're telling the Russians, get out of my face. We're going to sanction you. Oil's going to kill you. You're a gas station, and we're denying you gas. You're going out of business. Goodbye. And now the Russians have turned around and said, yeah, we're a gas station, and you're a bunch of automobiles that need gas, and we ain't giving it to you. And so now you want to negotiate a European security framework. And that's the reality. Russia's going to win this war. It may take some time yet. This may take another year, but they're going to win. There's nothing that can be done to stop this. And you're seeing NATO and the United States panic more and more as they get desperate, as they realize that they're going to lose everything. But Russia, the good news is Russia's everything we're not when it comes to the world. Let's talk about friendship. There are a lot of nations out there right now, because of this conflict, aren't getting food. And Russia and Ukraine were the breadbasket of the world. Now, food is big business. And I'm not going to pretend that neither Ukraine nor Russia made money off of selling food. They did. It's big business. They do that. But Russia has come out and said, hey, we understand what's going on is tough. And so we're going to give you our food for free. Africa, you need 500 tons of food, 500,000 tons of food. I don't know what it's a big number. Yeah. We're going to give it to you for free. Lebanon's sitting there going, hey, we were supposed to give food, but Ukraine was supposed to bring us food, but the ship that's supposed to come here, the Europeans took it because it makes sense for fat white people to be fed, and brown people don't get to be fed, apparently. So the Lebanese are going, hey, what about us? And Europe's ignoring them. Ukrainians are ignoring them because Lebanon's broke. They don't have any money. And the Russians went, 25 million tons free. We'll take care of your food. That's what Russia does. Not because they're suckers, but because they know that eventually this war is going to end and they're going to have to work and live with these people. And when this war ends, Russia's going to want to work with Europe to get a new European security framework. Coming back to your question, you said, well, what about NATO? They're going to build up. NATO's broke. Okay, I mean, I can sit here and say, I want to go buy a membership in a golf club, and I want to buy brand new Titleist clubs, and I want to get golf lessons, and I want to do all that. And my wife's going to say, we don't have the money. I might be able to budget and let you go out play with your old clubs once a month on the municipal course. Okay, that's the best you're going to get. So NATO's sitting there going, we want 100,000 troops, we want 100,000 troops, we want to do this. With what? Your economy is broke. You're broke. You got nothing. The best you can do is play a couple rounds of municipal course. But now Russia's coming and saying, hey, I might be able to work with you on replacing that car that's costing you a lot of money with a new car that doesn't cost you quite as much money. And that frees up some money. So now you can play golf 3 times a week on the Muni course. And if you're nice, I'll let you into my club once a month. And Europe's going to go, that's a good idea. I think that's what's going to happen here. I think Russia's going to win this war. And then Russia isn't the kind of people to kick dirt in the face of people. They're going to turn around and say, because Russia's interests are to live in peace and harmony. That's really their interests. They don't want to dominate the world. So Russia's going to turn to Europe and say, okay, that was a mistake. We don't want to do that again. How do we prevent this? How do we get treaties that bring stability? And I think Europe is going to be more inclined to receive the next Russian draft treaty and give it due consideration. Because Russia's not going to go to war with Europe, because Europe is protected by NATO and Article 5. And that means nuclear war. But Russia doesn't want a situation where there's a new Cold War where it has to keep 1 million men in arms on the border. That's stupid. That's bad money. And NATO doesn't want to do that either. Their economies are crushed. They need to be working on rebuilding their economies. So Russia's going to offer something that benefits them as well as NATO by saying, let's not talk about 1 million men let's talk about getting these men back, put them back in civilian industry, living in peace and harmony. Let's talk about that. And that's a dialogue I do believe that Europe's going to be ready to have. You know who's not going to be ready to have that dialogue? America, because that doesn't suit our purposes. We don't want that. But we're not going to have a vote in this because Europe's waking up to the fact that we are literally the worst nation on the planet. That everything we touch dies. We do no good. Think about it. We do no good. We used to do good. I would just challenge anybody right now to list me 10 good things America does today in the world.
But Rashid, we thank Scott for his time. We'll give 2 more questions, and we know he's a busy man. This man has a hectic schedule. So you get to ask him a question. I'll ask him the last one, and we'll wrap up.
Well, I'll answer your third question first. Miami Dolphins. Okay, go on.
Okay. What about this Iranian drone stuff?
Well, I had an interesting conversation with a Russian. I have to tell you, when I first heard about the Iranian drone story, I didn't believe it. I was like, no, Russians don't need Iranian drones. Russians are Russians. They got drones. They know how to do drone warfare and all that stuff. And then I was talking to this Russian officer, and he said, no, we need the drones, and we got a lot. We're buying them from Iran. We're buying a lot of them. I said, well, why would you do that? You're Russia. Why would Russia? And they said, well, we're fighting the kind of war we never planned to fight. We never planned to fight this static war. We wanted to fight this mobile war, and our drones were geared for this mobile kind of conflict. We're in a static conflict now where our drones are expensive. And so every time we fire a drone, that's a lot of money down and so we got to hit a high value target. Now we're in a situation where there's a lot of targets. Not all of them are high value, but we have to hit them anyways. We could go bankrupt firing our expensive stuff at these, or we could go to the Iranians, spend 30 grand for a flying moped that goes in, and boom, success. You kill something with 30 grand that otherwise you're spending, $250,000 on. It made good sense. And the Russians are buying this stuff, and there's nothing the Ukrainians can do to stop it. These little mopeds are just boom. And so the solution now, they're going out and buying modern air defense. And some of this air defense is pretty sexy stuff. But again, 30 grand, 1.5 million, misses. Another 1.5 million, misses. 1.5, boom, you got it. $4.5 million to shoot down $30,000. And eventually what happens is the next one comes in, and they don't have any missiles left. Boom, they blow up the air defense. That's what's happening around. Ukraine has nothing. They got no more air defense. They're out. Why? Because Russia went out and bought a whole bunch of cheap Iranian drones. And the Russians are getting ready to buy some cheap other Iranian stuff because the Russians make good equipment, but it's expensive. It's expensive. The Iranians are perfect. Ask any American what happened after we assassinated Qasem Soleimani. The Iranians fired those 12 missiles into the Al-Assad air base. And the Americans looking at it going, they hit everything they aimed at. I mean, pinpoint precision. Boom, boom, boom. And the Russians looked at it and went, that's pretty good. How much those cost? You're telling me that I'm going to spend $1 million for a Russian missile and you're going to sell me a missile just as accurate for 50 grand? Let me sign that contract. So that's what's going on with Iran. The Russians are doing this. Plus, it shows that the Iranians and the Russians are committed. Well, you know, this is one of the fatal mistakes we've made with Iran. For many years, Iran was pro-West under the Shah. And even after the Shah, under the theocracy, many people in Iran, I traveled to Iran in 2007. And I went there and I had a very interesting lunch. I was eating lunch and these guys came up to my table and they sat down, introduced themselves. They were from the Iranian Revolutionary Guard. These are the bad boys. And I'm thinking, oh, damn it, I'm going to spend some time in jail and they're going to have fun torturing me. And yay. I get to find out if I'm half as bad as I think I am. They were the nicest people. They were nice guys. They just wanted to talk. But we had a frank conversation because one guy admitted that he had been stationed in Paris in the 1980s and that he assassinated Kurdish dissidents. I said, so you are a terrorist? You're telling me straight up you're a terrorist? He said, by your definition, yes, 100%. I said, but the thing is, we quickly learned that this isn't the way we want to go. See, when we were in the West, we're looking around and there's a lot of things we don't like about the West. You know, we're not into all the sex that you guys have. We're not into drugs, but we're looking around saying things work pretty good in the West. You know, there's some efficiency here. Maybe we could find a way to work with the West, not against the West. And so they came back and they started to lobby the Iranian government. And if you take a look and you study the history, one of the Iranian presidents, and again, I'm losing my brain, so I can't remember his name right off the bat, but he's the guy who was right after the Iran-Iraq war. He started rebuilding the economy and focusing to the West. He was following the advice of these Revolutionary Guard guys. But they very much wanted to be not friends with the West, meaning they didn't want to have the West bring their culture here, but they wanted to do business with the West because they felt that was the most economically advantageous route. They've always resisted what they call the pivot to the East. They've always resisted pivoting to China and Russia. Well, thanks to America's stupidity, we compelled Iran to pivot to the East. They are now committed to the East. And when Iran commits, they commit. And we're seeing that right now with Russia. They are committed to helping Russia. And Russia and Iran have expanded economic relations. The Russians are selling gas that the they're providing gas to Iran that's being used in the northern part of Iran. And the Iranians are freeing up gas in the south that can be exported on behalf of Russia. This is a mutually beneficial relationship. So Iran is committed to Russia. Iran is joining BRICS, their economic force. Iran is joining this Shanghai Cooperation Organization. Iran and Russia are having the kind of relationship that the West and Iran could have had, but we stiff-armed Iran, and they've now pivoted. So I think I answered that question.
So the last question, a double question.
I thought Raider Rashid got the last question. You're still in his last question.
So what do you
Rashid,
think?
After that last debacle in New Orleans, I ain't gonna say too much.
Okay.
With Iran showcasing its technological prowess with the drones and with the missiles, how do you think a war with Iran and the U.S. or Iran and Israel will play out? Because Iran is hammering those Mossad training camps in northern Iraq and Iraqi Kurdistan. Will that explode into something?
Remember we had that conversation about the American military, and I told you that they're real. They know the real world. Mm-hmm. The Israeli military knows the real world. And the Israeli military knows the following, that Iran is a long way away. That in order to strike Iran, Israel would have to take its air force, fly it a long distance, which means multiple refueling required, enter into a heavily defended airspace, launch an airstrike, and then come back, and that cannot be sustained. So let's say they even get a good first punch in. This is a 15-round super heavyweight fight. The first punch means nothing. Now the Iranians are going to sit back and hit the button, and all these missiles are going to fly in. Remember that pinpoint precision? Israel's a very small country. It's even smaller when you talk about the important targets. And these targets will be obliterated. Non-nuclear, just conventional, boom, boom, boom. And there's nothing the Israelis can do to stop it. They can't stop it. And so Israel will be destroyed. That's why Israel's not going to start a fight with Iran. They're going to carry out this low-intensity covert fight where they blow up, they assassinate a nuclear scientist here, they blow up a nuclear facility here, they sink a ship here, and the Iraqis or the Iranians will respond by shelling a Mossad base here and all that. That's the war they're going to fight. But they're not going to fight the big one because Israel knows they can't win that one. Saudi Arabia, there's a lot of talk about Saudi Arabia, going to go to war against Iran. Well, no. And the answer is simple. Saudi Arabia exists only because of oil. That's it. Take away the oil, Saudi Arabia doesn't exist. They got nothing. All the Gulf Arab states are that way. It's oil. And that oil comes out of the ground in giant facilities that are very vulnerable. And the Iranians have a lot of drones and missiles that can eliminate facilities overnight. Gone, finished, forever. And so every Arab state knows that if they go to war against Iran, they will cease to exist as modern nation states because all the oil that they produce will never get out of the ground because all the facilities will be destroyed by the Iranians. Now, yes, they'll destroy the Iranian facilities and all that, but that doesn't do them any good. They exist because they like to fly around in jumbo jets and luxury jets and stay in five-star hotels and buy their wives unique perfume. I bring that up because I was in London once and I went to one of these the Arab perfumeries. And I just said, hey, what's the most expensive perfume they got? And they showed it to me. And I said, well, if I wanted to buy that, how much they got? I said, you can't buy that. And I said, why not? They said, because that's made only for the king's wife, one of his king's wives. Only she's allowed to have. We have to have it here in case she shows up, and then we can sell her that perfume. But nobody else in the world is allowed to wear it. Okay, you don't have that kind of stuff unless you got oil money. Okay, that's not normal. That's not how normal people live. And so the Saudis are addicted to oil money, and they won't have oil money if they go to war against Iran because Iran will eliminate all of their oil production. That's just a statement of fact. So I think that's one reason why Iran is flexing as much as they are right now. They're not being overly aggressive, but the Iranians aren't backing down. And one of the reasons why they're not backing down is that they have built up a very capable military that can do a lot of damage. But they don't want to overplay their hands because the Iranians aren't suicidal. Because the Iranians know if they ever get in that fight with Israel, that fight with Saudi Arabia, that in addition to making Israel and Saudi Arabia pay, Iran will pay too. And no leader comes into power saying, I want to bring harm to my people. The good leaders say, I want to make my people prosper and live well. So Iran is trying to work with the world. It's built up a defense that's capable of deterring enemy aggression, but their primary focus is on economic development. That's why they're joining BRICS, the BRICS Economic Alliance. That's why they're joining the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. That's why they're trying to work with China and Russia now economically, not just militarily, but economically, because that's what's going to make life good for the Iranian people. And again, I was in Iran. I'll tell you this. I don't know, where are you guys from, by the way? Just what state?
Pensacola, Florida.
Okay.
California.
Yeah, oh, wow. We got the East and West Coast. Okay. Well, I assume you guys have driven across country and you've taken a look at the state of the American highway system. In some places, it's really good. In some places, it ain't so good. I drove on the Iranian highway system. It was better than anything we got here in New York, I'll tell you that. And the New York Thruway is considered to be one of the best in the country. The Iranians had us covered. They super highway, 8 lanes, and then they had these rest stops. And I've been to New York State rest stops. The bathrooms are, the food, I went in there, clean, good food, everything. And I said, am I in Iran? Because I had been led to believe that the Iranians were sort of this backwards nation. And I'm going, man, you're good. And then I walked around and I said, you guys got a mall. I went to their mall and I'm going, no. I meant an Iranian mall. They said, no, this is an Iranian mall. They had all the big store names. They had everything clean, air conditioned, immaculate, fully stocked. So, we sit here and think that the Iranians win. We're Americans. We're the best in the world. Well, don't put me in a math Olympiad. 2 plus 2, I don't know. I need a calculator sometimes. The Iranians win these things. They have highly educated people. The Iranians have more peer-reviewed PhD theses than the United States or any European country. They believe in education, and then they apply the education. So we can sit here and make fun of them because we don't know them. We don't understand them. We mock that which we don't know. But the Iranians are pretty squared away. I'm not saying they're perfect. I'm not saying that at all. Everybody has their problems. But before I'm going to wag an accusatory finger in anybody's direction, I sort of want to make sure that I'm not living in a glass house. And America is nothing but one giant big glass house. And, we shouldn't be throwing stones at anybody. But the Iranians are pretty squared away. I have a lot of appreciation for them. Yes, sir.
One thing, I was watching a program on North Korea. Now, if you listen to the mainstream media, everybody in North Korea, they don't have belts, they have ropes. And everything is bad in North Korea. But I was watching a program. North Korea is a pretty modern society.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't been there, so I can't attest to it. But I would say, again, nothing's as bad as we make it out to be. The North Koreans, they do have some hunger issues that they're working with. But I mean, you would too if you were sanctioned to the degree they are. They're not allowed to interact with the world. But a backwards nation doesn't produce overnight intercontinental ballistic missiles that can deliver nuclear weapons to the United States. Say what you want about North Korea. They got some pretty smart people. They have some advanced industry. And I imagine they do things pretty good to a pretty high standard. Could things be better? Of course they could. That's why Kim Jong-un was meeting with Donald Trump to try and have a denuclearization treaty so that he can improve the economy. Because why? Good leaders want to bring good things to their people. And say what you want about Kim Jong-un, he's a good leader because he cares about his people. Unlike, say, an American president that wants to give all our money away to the Ukrainians while our people suffer. But anyways, that's that. I've really enjoyed being on here with you guys. I thank you very much for having me. I hope I don't get you kicked off of YouTube too quick.
Thank you, Scott, man. Thank you so much. We'll talk later, and we really appreciate you coming on the platform.
I appreciate. Could you do me a favor though?
Yes, sir.
Send me a link to the YouTube thing, and then I'll put it on my Telegram channel and try and get some more people to watch you. And I think this was a pretty cool conversation. I'd like more people to see it.
Thank you so much. Hey, be blessed and stay safe. Thank you a lot.
I'll do my best. You too. Right. And good luck, Raiders. I mean, come on. A good one.
Wait a minute. Wait, before you click me off, I want to pay a bill, and it was a New Orleans Saints guy in there, fan in there. He was throwing at me.
Yeah.
All I had to do is say, "You're right.
No, New Orleans gets lucky every now and then. I lived in New Orleans for a while. Who dat? Look, they're living a moment right now, but the Raiders will come back. Don't worry about it.
All right. Yeah, all right.
Okay.
All right, be blessed.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Everybody, listen, the reason we're broadcasting on this, this is our backup channel. We usually broadcast on the Red Pill Diaries, but this is our broadcast because we've been suspended for over a week or 2 weeks because of a program we did last week with Jim Fetzer, the founder of Scholars for 911 Truth. And YouTube has said to us that we violated their guidelines, but they haven't specified the guidelines that we violated, and they are threatening to eliminate the YouTube channel. We're also on Odyssey. We're also on we're getting ready to get on Rockfin. We're on Locals at Empowerment of Truth. locals.com and also the Red Pill Diaries. We're also on Patreon, patreon.com/the Red Pill Diaries. And we have some other platforms that we're on. And we just want to thank you for giving us your time for this impromptu interview. Scott had hit me up late last night and said he wanted to come on the show. And this morning he hit me up to remind me. And so we did an impromptu show, and we appreciate him coming on. And we just want everybody to be blessed. Always remember to stay strong, stay true, but above all things, stay righteous. I love you, but remember that God will always love you best. Mama, I love you. Peace.